The air in the Roman port of Alexandria hung heavy. It was the year 48 BCE. The city buzzed with trade and imperial ambition. But beneath the surface of commerce lay a deep tension. It was the friction between Roman order and the ancient ways of Egypt. The priests moved through the bustling docks with a quiet reverence. They carried customs that the Roman administration viewed with suspicion. Augustus, in his role as the new authority, sought to impose a singular vision of piety. He desired conformity across his vast empire. The Egyptian rites presented a challenge to this new structure. They were practices rooted in millennia of tradition. They did not fit neatly into the Roman framework for worship. Augustus felt this dissonance keenly. He saw foreign cults as potential threats to imperial stability. The priests, in turn, felt their sacred duties were being undermined by Roman decree. This was not merely a disagreement over ritual. It was a clash of civilizations. The shadow of Roman authority stretched long across the sacred spaces of Egypt. It cast doubt upon established religious practice. The tension built slowly like a rising tide. Augustus watched from afar. He sought to control what he could not fully comprehend. The silence between the Roman legions and the Egyptian temple was deafening. It spoke volumes about the precarious balance of power then. The scrutiny sharpened when tangible items entered Roman territory. These were not mere trinkets. They were objects steeped in deep religious significance. The debate centered on specific granite statues taken from the Karnak temple complex. These statues were carved with divine likenesses. They represented gods whose worship was strictly regulated by Egyptian doctrine. Augustus issued a formal decree in 20 BCE. This decree targeted the movement of such items into Roman hands. The concern was not just about ownership, it was about the sanctity of the objects themselves. Roman officials argued that these statues represented idolatry, forbidden by imperial law. They claimed the very stone carried a dangerous spiritual charge. The documentation became crucial in this dispute. The imperial secretary played a key role here. He was tasked with meticulously recording every violation. His reports detailed the precise nature of the transgression. They noted the granite statues and their unauthorized transit. The secretary's records served as the backbone of the legal challenge. They provided the evidence needed to prosecute the religious breach in court. The debate moved from abstract philosophy to concrete proof. The formal battle unfolded within the imposing walls of the Roman Senate chamber. The atmosphere was thick with legal formality and simmering disagreement. Augustus's representatives presented their case with cold, Roman logic. They argued for the supremacy of imperial law over foreign rites. A skeptical Roman magistrate offered testimony against the Egyptian claims. He spoke of tradition versus imperial mandate. The magistrate questioned whether these foreign objects truly warranted such severe punishment. It was a delicate balancing act between respecting ancient beliefs and enforcing new political order. The climax arrived when the religious import was officially seized. A formal judgment was rendered in favor of Roman authority. The statues were removed from the temple grounds and placed under direct imperial custody. This moment marked a clear victory for Roman governance. It showed that even sacred objects were subject to the dictates of the state. The silence following the seizure was heavy with the weight of political consequence. The search led to a dusty, forgotten archive deep within the imperial library. The air down there was still and heavy with the scent of aged papyrus and dry leather. There it was, a letter written by Augustus's personal scribe. It was not a decree but a private note filled with veiled concern. The letter spoke of the immense value of the Egyptian materials. It detailed how these items were not merely trinkets for trade. They carried a deep spiritual weight. The scribe wrote that the true worth lay not in gold or lapis lazuli, but in the prayers embedded within the stone. The letter revealed a surprising detail about the materials. It mentioned that certain funerary objects possessed an almost palpable connection to the gods of the Nile. This detail shifted the understanding of the entire situation. It showed that the conflict was not just about commerce or political dominance. It was a clash between two fundamentally different understandings of sacred duty. A quiet realization settled upon the reader. The imperial pragmatism was not entirely cold. There was a layer of reluctant acknowledgement about the depth of the beliefs being suppressed. The decision was made quickly. The priests could not wait for a formal appeal in Rome. They needed distance. They began the arduous journey toward the eastern borderlands. The movement of the banned items was slow and clandestine. It involved moving through territories where Roman oversight was thin. The landscape changed dramatically as they moved away from the familiar Mediterranean coast. They traversed vast stretches of arid desert. The sun beat down relentlessly on their weary forms. Every step was a test of endurance and faith. The silence of the desert was profound. It amplified the urgency of their mission. The priests felt a growing sense of dread mixed with fierce determination. They were moving from the center of imperial power into the forgotten edges of the known world. The journey itself became a desperate act of defiance against the decree. They sought refuge where the law held little sway. Finally, they found it. A hidden oasis tucked away in a forgotten canyon. The air here was cooler and damp compared to the desert heat. It was a place where the watchful eyes of Rome rarely fell. The priests made their desperate meeting at this hidden spot. They spoke not of legal arguments, but of shared belief and ancient law. They recounted stories passed down through generations. These stories served as a shield against the harsh reality of Roman judgment. There was a moment of profound shared faith between the elders. They relied on ancient knowledge to protect what remained of their sacred items. The decision was made then. They would hide the most potent relics in this sanctuary. It was a final act of preservation, a quiet promise to carry the faith forward despite the political storm. He found himself in the dusty heart of the imperial archives. The air here was dry and smelled of aged parchment and forgotten things. He began inspecting the official imperial ledger entries. The records were meticulous. They showed a clear line of authority. Every entry documented the seizure and subsequent inventory of the Egyptian items. The public record spoke only of confiscation. It presented a straightforward narrative of imperial decree and necessary order. But he knew the truth lay beneath this surface. He compared the public records side by side with the hidden truth he had gathered from the priests. The official entries omitted crucial details. They smoothed over the severity of the religious offense. There were gaps in the documentation. Where there should have been detailed justifications for the seizure, there was only silence. He realized this was not accidental oversight. It was deliberate bureaucratic maneuvering. The machinery of the state had worked to sanitize the transgression. The law served as a convenient shield for imperial ambition. He allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. He considered the cultural shift in Egyptian religious practice. The ban had not simply stopped a transaction, it had altered the very way certain beliefs were practiced. The community learned to practice in whispers. They moved their rituals into the shadows of daily life. The artifacts themselves became symbols of endurance rather than public worship. There was a quiet moment of remembrance for the lost items. They were no longer grand displays. They were private tokens of survival. The enduring memory of the conflict between empires lingered in the air. It was a lesson etched not in stone but in silence. The conflict showed that even profound faith could be crushed by the weight of political power. Yet, the memory persisted. It served as a quiet testament to resilience against overwhelming force. He considered the political necessity of the action. Augustus faced a difficult choice between maintaining strict legal precedent and acknowledging spiritual dissent. The decree was framed as necessary for public order. It positioned the state above all religious concerns. He saw the stark contrast between imperial law and spiritual belief laid bare in this judgment. The law demanded compliance. The faith demanded endurance. Augustus's final ruling was a statement of imperial supremacy. It showed that even sacred objects were subject to the dictates of the state. The ultimate outcome was a victory for order. It was a clear demonstration that political stability superseded religious freedom in the eyes of the ruling power. The conflict ended not with a treaty, but with a definitive assertion of control. The air grew still again. The journey had ended not with a grand pronouncement, but with a quiet understanding. He found himself in a place far removed from the clamour of Roman decree, or the harsh scrutiny of imperial courts. It was a quiet stretch of desert near the fringes of Egypt. The sun cast long shadows across the dunes. He sat down where the sand was soft and yielding beneath him. This silence felt different from the enforced quiet of a courtroom or the tense hush before an official announcement. This was a silence earned by distance and solitude. It was a space where history could breathe without the immediate pressure of judgment. He looked out at the endless expanse. He thought of the objects that had caused such turmoil, the sacred items that had crossed borders and challenged established order. They were now just memories carried on the desert breeze. The tension between Roman law and ancient faith had been a loud argument in the city. Here the argument faded into a low hum beneath the vastness of the landscape. He considered the exchange between power and belief. The decree had been a sharp line drawn in the sand. It showed that even sacred things could be measured and controlled by the state. But the desert offered a different measure. It showed endurance. The faith did not break under the pressure of the law. It simply moved with the landscape. He felt a deep sense of reflection. The history he had witnessed was not just about laws or bans. It was about the enduring human need for connection to the sacred. The conflict between the empire and the ancient ways was a constant theme in that era. It showed how fragile such boundaries truly are when faced with deep-seated belief. The lasting impression was one of quiet acceptance. The tension did not vanish entirely. It settled into the landscape like fine dust. It became part of the silence, a quiet acknowledgement that power and faith exist in a constant, subtle dialogue. The echoes of the past remained in the sand. They were soft now. They were simply history resting under the vast, patient sky.